Acorns and pockets, stewardship and bones, where conservation begins. It is so easy, here in our noisy neon world, to lose sight of what we are actually keeping, of what we are actually conserving. Amid the white papers, press releases, and committee hearings, all the grand efforts in Washington to steward our good green world, we must not forget the small places that generated our desire to keep. The brook in the forest behind the house that swells in the spring, the edge of the meadow where you buried your childhood dog, the lake where your father taught you to swim. The first green allegiance a person ever makes is rarely to an abstract sense of the environment, rarely to some distant concept of the climate. It is more likely to be a creek where they waded, a pine where they climbed, a field in which they played. A real, small, green place. Conservation requires a deep fidelity, and fidelity is learned at the closest range. It is hyper-localized. Before a child can care about the world, that child has to fall in love with a specific patch of loam, with the sound of the waves, with the light and the branches of trees. The family is the first garden where that love on which all good stewardship depends takes root. Ultimately, all conservation starts at home. The quiet ways we show a child the good green world matter more than our words. We so often reflexively lecture children. We tell them caring about the land matters. This reflex is worth resisting because good stewardship is not inspired from a speech. It is taught slowly through love, through attention, through a natural responsibility that feels like joy before it feels like duty. You take the little one along when you plant the garden, split kindling, forage in the woods. You walk slow through a park and name what is there like a prayer. Oak, milkweed, monarch, salamander, ash, track, fern. You stop and try to remember the ordinary miracles, the kind adults forget to see because we are trained to keep moving. A bonfire in the backyard, a picnic in a meadow, a gray morning at the shoreline with cold hands. These are the grammar, the fundamental language of conservation. Through these small green lessons, these small celebrations of place, a child sees that their larger world is not an artificial stage set for their consumption, but a home worth and in need of protecting. They learn that water is not just what comes out of a faucet, but what runs downhill, fills rivers, breeds trout, carries canoes. They learn that food tastes of soil, sun, rain, and work. A child who grows with these small wild practices does not need to be convinced later that nature matters. The conviction is already marrow deep in their good little bones, as familiar as their own name. Then quietly, unexpectedly, the lesson turns around and returns. Children are not only students of the land, they are its translators. Their eyes are untrained in our anxious adult habits of hurry. They move through a landscape like new settlers, curious, unashamed, awake, and they pull us back into that attentive wakefulness. A grown man walks a trail, thinking about deadlines and headlines, while a small restorative voice calls him over to see a spiderweb jeweled with early frost. A mother scans a river for the quickest crossing, while her daughter kneels to watch a crayfish merge its camouflage carapace with the water's stones. A family drives past a half-frozen pond 100 times on the way to school and to work, while the boy in the back seat notices the blood-blush winter red of the dogwood on the far shore. We are often blind to seasonal turnings because our minds are full of other weather, the forecast of the week, the forecast of what fresh anxiety the headlines sell us with a fever. Children live nearer the surface of things. They notice the mouse tracks at the edge of the barn in February, the spring alder pollen beguiling the air, the first fireflies at the woodline in July. They show us that delight is still possible, that the good green pattern of the seasons continues to turn, that there is more happening in a hedgerow than any screen has ever managed to hold. Their love becomes a mirror in which we see our own love, sometimes blurred, sometimes neglected, sometimes waiting like coals under ash to be fanned back into flame. When they bring you a pocketful of acorns, you remember oaks. When they ask why the creek is lower than last year, you remember water. When they cry over a turtle crushed on the road, you remember patience and care. The conserving heart in the child repairs the conserving heart in the adult, and the bond between them becomes a small covenant with the world outside the door. Let the big, necessary work go on where it must. Let people argue policy, raise funds, build tools, file lawsuits, organize campuses, testify in hearings. We need those hands, those minds, those hours. We live in a wounded world that requires deep effort to heal. However, none of those important efforts will hold if the springs of small daily wonders dry. A nation cannot conserve what its homes do not cherish. A movement cannot keep sight of creation if its people were never taught to see. The hearth, the backyard, the path, the garden row, the creek behind the ball field, the bow-dappled light on the forest floor. These are the seedbeds of the conservationist's ethic. Start there. Stay there. Bring your children with you, and let them bring you back. If all conservation starts at home, then home is never reduced to a retreat from the work. Home becomes the first front, the training ground, the wellspring. Teach a child to love the green places, and you have already begun to save them. Let a child teach you to slow and to wonder at your place again, and the love they renew in you will flow back into the child, and back into the place, and back into the life you share. It is a good, green cycle of attention and of gratitude and of care, and it always originates from the home. If you enjoyed this piece, follow the Bully Pulpit on Substack and ACC National on all other social media platforms. Join us in the arena building the conservative environmental movement.